Divorcing someone who is emotionally abusive doesn't always end the abuse. It often just changes the form. And you might still be walking on eggshells, bracing for the next move in court, or trying to navigate this manipulative and controlling dynamic. So today we're joined by Krasi Kirova, a clinical psychologist who specialises in emotional and psychological abuse, coercive control, and the trauma that comes with high conflict separations. She also runs workshops for women for navigating harmful relationships. At kirovapsychology.com.au/workshop, you can go to the website and download the handout for co-parenting with an abusive ex-partner. With her background in trauma-informed care and family violence, Krasi helps us unpack what it really looks like to deal with an abuser after you've left, especially during divorce negotiations and parenting arrangements. So today we're going to be discussing how to protect your emotional health, set boundaries at work, and how to respond or not respond when your ex is trying to draw you back into the cycle of abuse. So if you're trying to break free, this episode's for you. But before we get started, this may be triggering for some people, so please consider calling 13 11 14 if you're triggered, or if you are experiencing family violence, please call 1-800-RESPECT, or if you're in danger, call 000. And just a legal disclaimer and a psychological disclaimer that the information today is just general in nature. So please always see your own psychologist and please always see your own lawyer before making any decisions in your particular situation. So welcome, Krasi.
Hi Laura and hi Lynn.
Hello, Krasi.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Laura. Hello, everyone.
So, Krasi, after we had you on last time for our amazing Are You Suffering from an Emotional Abuse episode, we got so many messages from people thanking you for opening their eyes and for validating their feelings. And I think that episode was so important. But you said to me in an email, oh no, we haven't told them what to do. So we've just told them what's going on.
Yes.
So, and to be fair, we wouldn't have been able to do that in a whole episode anyway.
Yes.
So I cannot thank you enough for coming back to do another episode with us.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my passion. It's my work that comes from the heart. So I always want to talk about it. And you have such an amazing platform. So I think it's a match made in heaven for all of us.
I agree.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
I've been speaking to a couple of listeners just recently on the phone and hearing their voices and hearing that they're listening to these episodes when they're alone at night. They're listening to these episodes on the way to work. And so we hear you and we see you if you're listening today. And if this helps, that's the whole point why we do this. And I know that's why Krasi does this. So sending love to you. Let's get into it. And I'm going to be throwing some big questions at you, Krasi, because really, how do you cope after leaving someone? How do you stay grounded? How do you deal with a person like this once you finally got out, but you still have to go through divorce?
Yeah. Well, the very short answer is you don't really cope that great. But that is expectable. That fallout, when you come out of these relationships, I think there is this notion that this is the big step and from here on, the recovery journey is going to start. You're going to start healing. The worst is behind you. And that is just not the reality for a lot of people, especially when you're going to go through divorce, their children, their settlement to go through. Research shows us that, for example, when there is coercive control in a relationship, that's 97% predictor for post-separation abuse.
And I think that's important because I do see so much online that says, get out, leave, but no warning that it's not over, sadly.
Yeah.
And I think if you go out with the right expectations of, okay, I'm leaving, but I've still got a bit of a ways to go, it's less stressful in a little bit.
Yes, I mean, expectations are so important because expectations help you prepare. They help you strategically plan your next steps. And when you're going to be dealing with a divorce and with legal proceedings, you have to start preparing way before you're even out of it because it can come as a shock after this. And also, I think the big one as well is when you come out of these kind of relationships, if we can even talk about coming out, given you're going to be dealing with all the legal stuff after, but when at least you come out of the relationship, you are depleted, you're exhausted, physically, emotionally, you're completely drained. There's nothing left to give. And because finally the body almost kind of steps out of that survival stage, there is almost a moment of falling apart at that point. And yet you can't afford to fall apart, because then the next thing starts, which is the whole legal process. You have to learn so much new information. You have to deal suddenly with all these institutions you've never had to deal with before. You have to learn and learn quickly what to do, what not to do, what your options are. Sometimes you have to deal with police, not to mention you have to parent your children all at the same time while holding a job as well. So no wonder that after you're not coping probably in the way you imagined, and that is expectable. I just want to normalize that for everyone who's listening.
I mean, I can think of an example where I have a big project I need to get done. Like, we've just uploaded all of the new changes to the Family Law Act for property and did a whole new recording of all the property module. And I usually get migraines, and I haven't got one, but I know the minute this is all over, I'm going to get the biggest migraine, because my body knows, okay, you can afford to collapse now.
Exactly.
And it's the same, I guess, when you finally leave, you think, okay, now I can collapse with that. But then people might find out, oh, wait, no, you can't. You've got to keep it together for the kids and get through this next bit.
Yes.
And I think it is important to say it. I don't want to make people think horrible, and I don't want to deter them from doing what's best for them, but it is good to reality check.
Do you know,
so thank you.
I always say it's worth it.
Yes.
So you might be going through a lot, but there's a reason, and you will get your way through.
Yes. It's the necessary step of the journey, but it is absolutely a journey, and that's a big one to remember, that what you're dealing with now, it is still better, and it's still, there is hope. There is hope at the end of it, because if you don't leave, if you stay in these relationships, they're not going to get better, and what is there to hope for? But when you come out of it, even though it might be the unknown, there is hope at the end of it. There is freedom, there is agency, there is a self left at the end of that.
That's so true. So let's look at some of the things people have to do once they've stepped out of living with, and now they're moving into the detaching property, kids, sorting out divorce. There's going to have to be some communication, particularly if you've got kids. And I know we've got a lot of people listening who have got a type of ex who they are guilt tripping in co-parenting discussions. They're just kind of trying to manipulate them again the way they used to when they lived together to get what they want. What are some ways to handle that kind of manipulative co-parenting stuff that goes on, the guilt tripping in particular?
Yeah. I would say probably the first and most important thing is to start setting those boundaries in the communication, because that is now something you can do. When you're in an abusive relationship, it is very hard to set boundaries because it only actually aggravates the situation. But when you're out of it, you now have options and choices you didn't have within the relationship. And the big one is you can have some level of control of how much and how you communicate with that person. So it is not a matter of, the way I see it is being in the firing line of an abuser is like being exposed to toxic air. There is no way to avoid the poison toxicity of it, but you can limit your exposure to it once you're out of it. And that's what boundaries do for you. You don't have to respond to every email, every call they make to you. You don't even have to do it yourself. That's why you get a lawyer, and they become your buffer and they become your voice so that you don't have to do that. When you start, I know for my clients, and Lynn mentioned that, but also they get called to mediation literally a few days after the separation happens, and they're in no state. They have no knowledge what to do. You don't have to jump the moment they say jump.
I love it. I love it. And when they set a timetable for answering something and demand urgency, their urgency doesn't have to be yours.
Exactly. Especially because their urgency is another manipulation too in that situation. It's another way of controlling the whole process after. And sometimes it is about remembering, I don't have to do that anymore. And what is the worst that can happen?
Yeah. And one of the most empowering podcast episodes we've done, I think, for people in this particular situation that I strongly recommend you listen to, is, do I really need to respond to that? Where mum goes through and says, what are the things you legally probably should respond to? And what are the things you can just let go to the keeper? Because I think there's an added layer of anxiety for people who are leaving an ex, but they still have to go through children's matters.
Yes.
And am I going to get in trouble for ignoring the person? Like, what am I legally having to do? What am I legally not allowed to do? So please go listen to that episode if that's you, because I think it's important that there are some things that you can't ignore, but setting up those boundaries is fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, another type of area that I think people suffer with is the anxiety around anything to do with communicating legally. So like all of a sudden they might be getting calls from mediators, calls from lawyers, court appointments,
Child support,
family report writers, child support. And then if you are going through family violence or have experienced it, you'll also be getting the phone calls from the domestic violence services and the 1-800-RESPECT people and all these things, all ringing to check you're okay, but just causing so much anxiety that to the point where I know of people who just never answered the phone. So how can people deal with the anxiety of being bombarded and contacted by all sorts of people during this time?
Yeah. Well, again, I want to normalize it because it is completely a normal response and reaction. And it is also that overwhelmedness that comes at that point. And because some things are urgent, you can't really not do certain things. If the police is calling you and you need to go and do something, then you obviously have to do that. But if there are other sort of certain family events or work-related sort of things, those are the things you can pace yourself on. So I'd be really recommending people look at their schedule. They really think, okay, I'm going to need to pace myself. Very often, workplaces can be very understanding. There is the domestic leave, the family violence domestic leave available nowadays, I think for up to 10 days that you can get for most places, but also just understanding employers. Take a break. With the children, you don't need to organize every single birthday party, every big sort of get together. You can step out of these things for a moment. So see what you can take off your plate and attend to the things that are most important so they don't get sidelined in the process, and get your support system activated. If someone can do some of the stuff for you and they can help you, whether it's looking after the children, whether it's even reading through some of the emails or processing the information and then just kind of feeding you whatever you need to know, that is a huge help as well. I have personally been a support person for a personal friend of mine in such circumstances, and I was happy to listen to your podcast. This is years ago.
Oh, really?
I was the one listening to some of this and educating myself, and then I was communicating that to my friend because I knew she didn't have the capacity to gather all of this information, but I had the capacity. So if you can get someone else to do that for you, absolutely use it.
I think too, the value of what you did there, Krasi, is partly because when you've just left, you have, I think, an inflated or exaggerated idea of how powerful your ex really is.
Absolutely.
And the number of people have said to me, oh, but you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like. Do you find that?
Yes, absolutely. There's so many threats, and even they start obviously before the separation process, and you get so scared. Women absolutely believe it. Sometimes they are absolutely outlandish, completely unreasonable threats that have no whatsoever base in reality. But when you don't know, you don't know. So it's important to kind of do a reality check at that point. And that's why I also recommend be strategic when you start thinking about these things before you even leave. Go and speak to a lawyer, go and listen to the Divorce Course podcast so that you know what is realistic and what is not, and you can pay attention to the things that matter and not pay attention to the other stuff.
I think you raised before, Krasi, the family violence leave that's available. Yeah. And I want to speak to any of those people out there who are maybe professionals, maybe running big businesses that are like really, and they don't need to technically use the leave to run and hide or to go somewhere and stay in a shelter. But the leave is there. And when you have to fill in a million forms for all of the services, that's eat up so much time. So don't be afraid to take the leave. Because I've spoken to so many who are experiencing family violence but they feel like they shouldn't take the leave because they're not in the direst of circumstances. But your mental health will be so much better if you go, okay, well, I'm going to at least take one of the days this week so I can sit down and just work on the paperwork without the added stress of doing it at midnight when you get home and you've fed the kids and put them all to bed. So I just want to speaking out there to anybody who's thinking they don't need to take these days. I think they're there. The government created them. Take them.
Yeah.
That's what I think you should, and use them wisely.
I think you'd be a better boss and a better employee if you do take some time off. I think I worked through mine and I don't know how I coped. And I should have said, okay, this needs a break.
Yeah.
Is it possible, Krasi, this is a ridiculous question, to co-parent with someone who continues to emotionally abuse you?
Well, it made me think, I know we've mentioned it between us, Laura, but there is a really good researcher based in the UK called Emma Katz, and she's got an amazing Substack that people can find if they just Google her name, and maybe we can put it in the show notes. But she writes a lot on post-separation abuse and also the impact of abuse in relationships on mothers and children. And she has a brilliant article, which I think was called something like the 10 reasons why coercively controlling partners do not make for good parents. And that just really lays it all down, because these tactics that are being used in a relationship dynamic, they're absolutely being used towards the children as well. They don't just happen towards your partner, they happen towards the children. When you devalue a person, you devalue your children as well. You see them as extensions of yourself. You don't have the care for their needs. You don't have their best interest at heart whatsoever. They become pawns really in a game. So that is the definition of bad parenting in my mind.
Yes.
And that can only escalate after a separation.
Mum, do they see that in the court?
They do. And when people go for a family report, so often a qualified psychologist who's doing the report will be able to glean from talking to the children how much they've been involved in the disputes. Have they been told to say certain things? It's very clever of them, and they almost always call it. And a lot of clients say to me, oh, but I'm worried he'll be able to trick them. He'll be able to be Mr. or Miss, it's mostly the men, let's face it, that he'll be able to make them think I'm crazy. But no, these guys are professionals. But I see it all the time, and I think they do see through it, Laura.
Good. That's hopeful for people. So you just talked about family reports, Mum. So Krasi, these people, and I have seen the reverse. I have seen women do this to men. So I do know that there's both sides here, but it is predominantly men that are causing this issue. But people have to go to mediation. They have to go to court hearings. They have to go to these family report things. They have to attend things where their abusive ex is. How, Krasi, do you talk to your clients? How can you help them manage their stress when they have to turn up, they have to go, and they have to be in the same room with their abuser?
Yes, and I would like to open a bracket here and even say it's not just stress. This is trauma. At that point, what people are displaying is trauma symptoms rather than stress or simply anxiety, because they have been through much. Their body remembers so much. Their body reacts even if they're trying not to react. And I think sometimes there is a lack of trauma-informed approaches, both in the legal system, in the social services, in the supervised visits, and so on. And that's not being taken into consideration. So it is about how do I manage the trauma symptoms, but also expecting that they're out of my control and they will happen.
Yes.
I would say basic things like, again, trying to limit the contact. I think in a lot of places there are absolutely provisions where you don't have to be in the same room, in the same space with that person. You can organize to come in earlier or later, sit in separate rooms. You can communicate that to the mediator or to the report assessor or whoever needs to know, and that can be beneficial. Coming, if you can, with a support person to these events can make a big difference. It can really kind of provide that sense of safety and validation that can be lacking. Preparing yourself mentally and physically before that. You know what?
So, Mum, do they have anything? Can you ring up the court in advance and say, hey, I've been through this. I don't want to be... they can give you a room or something?
Yes, the court does safety plans for you. And of course, there are security guards. There's the ones that you can see and there's all the ones you can't see. So that helps. I've had matters where the trauma was so great. I put my client on a different floor of the court in another room so they couldn't be located. But yes, we're getting better at it too, I think. And there's different entrances and exits as well. And little things that we've learned over the years about not sitting, if they do have to be in the courtroom together, and sometimes they do, making sure that there's no opportunity for the abuser to walk behind or around that person, because especially if you're sitting down, I imagine that would bring back a lot of stress. But we're pretty clueless in a lot of ways. You'll have people say to clients, but it's only on Zoom. What are you talking about? What's your problem? So we've got a lot to learn.
We've got a lot to learn. One of the common things that I hear that really frustrates me is that, for example, during, let's say, supervised meetings, when, let's say, the mother is dropping off the child and then the father is there and they're going to spend some time, in that drop-off moment, because quite often they will see each other, they will meet, or he might turn up early just for the sake of coming face-to-face. The person will have significant trauma reaction. They might start shaking. They almost have a panic attack. They're visibly very distressed and upset. Children quite often either pick up on that and respond, or they themselves have a trauma reaction. When children don't want to be left in these supervised visits or they don't want to attend, they will also display the same symptoms. And then that becomes seen as a mother's emotional dysregulation, and it can work against her. It's being said that she is causing this to the child, or she is the problem because look at her completely unreasonable reactions.
And she's teaching anxiety to the children.
And that is so not trauma-informed. That is absolutely not what is going on here.
Yes.
So I wish there was more recognition.
Well, I've got a little bit of heart. Again, I'm Pollyanna here. I always see the possibilities. For the first time, contact centres, supervised centres, are having to be regulated and licensed. And this was the law from today. And they have to undergo family violence training. And I think in one of the discussions I've seen, I don't think it's in the legislation, but the misidentification of the perpetrator, where they say it's the mother projecting onto the child, and it's kind of understandable. The dad's on his best behaviour. The supervisor is spending hours over a period of time with this dad being impeccable with his children. And so then they write a report that kind of paints the mother in a bad light if she's anxious. But I do think we're beginning to see the beginning of a proper recognition of that. And I'm really proud that I'm still part of the profession while that's happening.
There's actually a name, I've only just learnt about it. I think it's an American term, but it's called, and again, I'm sorry to the dads who are experiencing this and listening today, but it's called CAMPS, child and mother sabotage. So there's actually a strategy out there to deliberately sabotage the mother by doing these strategies that you've described. I only just found out there's a whole lot of literature on it. Oh my goodness. So we're going to have to look into
Yes.
But the good news is that the new changes to the contact centres may make some sort of difference.
I think so. And the Chief Justice is dedicated to people understanding the impact on family violence. And he spoke to the crowd at the State of Origin. They played a film, and he's working on the young men who may potentially grow up to be perhaps an abuser. He's getting to them early so they understand what it is, and to identify it in themselves and not have it take over.
Well, that's good.
If you're separated or about to be and you need to get everything finalised and sorted but you don't know what to do next, or you're looking for a way to do your own divorce and settlement without spending thousands of dollars on lawyer, then you already know what you need to do, and that is to sign up and become a member of the DIY Divorce Blueprint. Empower, educate and equip yourself with the legal know-how and the tools you need to get divorced or de facto separated and finally settle. Work through this course at your own pace without feeling confused, lost, scared or overwhelmed of all the family law legal jargon and processes. Let us walk with you through this journey and show you a better way.
Now, Krasi, Another thing that happens to people when they're in this phase, and we talked about worrying about what to respond to and what to write to, but I do see a lot of people fall into this mistake where they just get to the point where they've had it and their ex has sent them some message that is deliberately designed to bait you or trigger you. And they desperately want to just tell them where to go and write some big long message, which is 100% the pitfall, which they will then screenshot and put in their affidavit and say, look how bad this person is. What is the best way that you tell to your people to step away from it so they don't write?
Yeah.
They don't take the bait.
Yeah. I have a very simple statement for that situation, and that's remember who your audience is.
That's powerful.
That is.
Yeah, because at that point, when you're communicating with them, you're already out of the relationship. You're not trying to fix anything there. You're not trying to convince them who was right, who was wrong. Yeah, so there is no point trying to get across your hurt, your pain, or to get them to see your point of view. It really becomes a strategic game, to be honest, at that point. And your audience really is not them, but who they're going to be showing the messages to. So that's who you're speaking to at that point. And I think if you can keep that in mind, when you're responding, it would help you calibrate your response and even regulate emotionally at that point in time.
Wow. Okay. I think with that's embroidering on the cushion.
I think it
Remember
is.
who your audience.
And do you know, if you've been sent a message that seems to be deliberately baiting you and they would expect you to rise to that bait, they are also writing for an audience. They're writing for whoever reads it and to provoke you to complete that cycle for them so they can put both bits of communication into evidence.
And look, the reality is nowadays we have things like ChatGPT, and while I'm not a proponent in general for it, if you can't trust your own sort of judgment in that moment, put the message in and ask it to write a respectful but firm response that can happen for you, and you don't even have to put all your emotional sort of energy into doing that.
That's really
so
good.
true. And you can use the Divorce Course Communication Compass. And you could put that into ChatGPT and say, follow this communication compass, write response that's following this. But again, we don't recommend using that. That's a whole different ball game. But I know people already
But
are.
in times of need, and you really can't, you don't have the emotional energy to do it, and you don't have trust in your own kind of ability to do that. That's when you...
Do you know, as evidence, a screenshot of the input you've put into ChatGPT, which talks about please write a respectful and polite but firm letter. That's also, if anyone attacks you over the letter, you can go, but I asked it to do this and here's my evidence.
It's not my fault.
Truly. I mean, because your input is what you told ChatGPT to do, you know? And so you're entitled, even though we all know there's hallucinations in AI, you're entitled to expect it is a respectful response.
I've actually had listeners write in and say they've started putting into ChatGPT the letters from their exes and asking it to point out the manipulation or the gaslighting or the, you know, and then refining it down to what they just really need to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't know whether that works, but I heard that someone suggested that the other day. Not recommending it, but that's an option.
Yeah.
So, Krasi, let's get back on track with some of these other questions. I know another thing that happens with people when they come out of these kind of relationships, particularly when you talked about the way that they dismantle your personality and dismantle your sense of self, and you're very questioning and you really don't know haven't learned how to rely on yourself or your instincts, etc. But you're having to see a lawyer and you're having to tell them what you want and you're having to make decisions. And so how do people who've been through coercive control or abuse, what tips or tools can you offer to help them rebuild their confidence so that when they are making decisions in these phases, that they're doing it from the right place?
Yeah. Well, again, just to go a little bit backwards, and maybe that's a good time to talk a little bit about the fallout, the impact of these abusive relationships before we even talk about, moving on. I think last time when we spoke and I talked about these relationships being a kind of an identity theft for a person where it sort of robs you of the things that make you the person who you are. And a necessary element when someone is trying to survive over the years in an emotionally abusive relationship is what you can consider an abandonment of the self. There is an abandonment of your perceptions, your sense of who you are as a person, your needs, because they always get subjugated to the needs of the other person, and also your autonomy and your sense of agency. And when you come out of those relationships, the healing process, the recovery process is starting to find your way back to those things again. And it is very difficult to advocate for yourself and to present a clear picture of your circumstances to a lawyer or to anyone else when you yourself don't yet have that. And you can't have that until you've been some time out of it, you've gained some clarity, and hopefully you've had the help and the assistance of maybe an experienced therapist, maybe a very good friend, whatever else have you, that helps you piece together that puzzle and helps ground you in a perspective that is actually self-respectable and self-affirming, because you've lost that. It's been taken away from you. So it is a process of trying to reclaim your kind of belief in yourself so that you can convince someone else, you can communicate that to someone else.
So it's throwing yourself in the deep end, really.
It really is.
When you then go from that to telling a lawyer what you want.
Yes, it's asking a lot of you. And one other thing to mention here that makes it also so difficult and you have to navigate is, of course, we've talked about the gaslighting, which is one of the hallmarks of these kind of relationships. And gaslighting is sowing doubt, creating doubt constantly in the other person and making them feel responsible and to blame for everything. But what the fallout of coming out of these relationships is that people start to self-gaslight themselves.
Yeah.
They lose trust in the same way. There is an internalization of the voice that you've heard for so long that now you can no longer distinguish your own voice and their voice. And so you're questioning, am I being unreasonable? Am I being selfish? Am I being the abusive one? Am I taking away their parental rights? And am I the one harming them? Am I asking for too much and being the greedy one? All the things that they tell you, you're now, in a way, telling yourself. So there is a process where you have to find that grounding. And I think some of the things that help, but I have to say it's a process. It doesn't just automatically happen once you come out of it. Is you want to educate yourself. You really want to learn about what has been done to you and how it's impacted you so that you can separate what's me and what is someone else's input. You want to find similar stories. There's a lot of very good podcasts as well available where women share, for example, their stories. There's good books on the subject. You want to talk with people, so people who understand and validate you so that they can help remind you. They can be that healthy external voice when you cannot find your own voice in these situations. You can write things down as well so that you don't forget in those moments when you get very weak in your resolve and you need to remember, no, this was bad. This was done to me. I need to do this for these and these reasons. It helps to look at those things.
I think that's one of the most powerful tips that we have heard is, and people have said that they wrote down what's happened and then they've put it away. And then over time, a couple of months or whatever, they go, oh, was it actually that bad? And what actually happened? And there's a forgetfulness as well as a minimizing, because they're saying, oh, it wasn't a big deal, But then if you then go back and look at your document, like some of our listeners have, they're going to go, oh, wait, no, it was bad.
Yes.
And a lot of them are surprised at how much they forgot.
Yes.
Like how many things they forgot.
Do.
Because I guess, like you said, Krasi, in the last episode you did with us, your brain can't cope with it, so you get rid of it. What did you call it?
It was betrayal blindness. The concept of betrayal blindness, where you can't afford to see the thing that is in front of you because there is such a high cost to seeing it. And so there is this kind of protective mechanism of the brain to just put it on the side, put it in a separate box where you don't have to look at it. And it can be very protective, but it also can be harmful towards yourself in blinding you to the things that you should be seeing.
Laura, when you go to see a solicitor, I think having your story written down, and you may build it up over a period of time, And I think the chronology that we talk about and just having all of that awful mess corralled into a list that when you go to the lawyer, you can hand that over for them to read. And while they're reading it, you will be able to calm down and you know that everything you wanted to say is written down there. I think that is probably, from a lawyer's point of view, that's quite helpful, but also from someone, if you get stressed, it gives you that bit of breathing space while they read.
So if anyone's going to take anything away from today, that would be to write stuff down.
Yes.
I guess journaling.
Yes.
Being aware, though, that if someone knows about the journal, they can subpoena it.
Yes.
So be really careful with what and where you're writing things, but try to have reminders, because particularly if you are divorcing someone like this, your court case may go on for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. You're going to forget the stuff from the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
So you need to be writing it all down. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case for anyone, but writing it down and reminding yourself when you need that result, because sometimes lawyers will go, was it really that bad?
Yes.
Are you sure? And you need to go, yes, it was. Just to remind yourself as well. I think that the last thing that I really want to touch on, and I'm very aware of our time, Krasi, but one of the things that I think, and I've just talked about a little bit, this lengthy, delayed, hellish process that our listeners go through, some of them with these kind of people, where their ex is enjoying the fight, their ex is enjoying the attention, they're loving that it's all about them. So they want it to go on for as long as possible, whereas the listeners today are going, I just want it over. So how do you recommend to your people who come to your workshop, for example, how do you get them to stay strong enough to get through this kind of stuff?
Since you mentioned the workshop, the one big thing that comes out of the workshop is that it does create a supportive community, because it's one thing to go through something alone, and it's a whole different experience to go through it with the support and with other people around you. So that makes a big difference, and that's what women can get out of it. A supportive community that continues, because they do set up a support group and they continue to chat and be in communication with each other.
Oh, that's right.
But the fact is, these processes, they easily go over a year, more than a year, 2, 3 years even, and so on. It doesn't mean that the rest of your life gets put on hold. These become kind of moments in time, things you have to deal with, letters you receive, or meetings and court dates you have to prepare for, but they're not all the time. Your life is happening in the rest of the time. And there are things you can do to start moving forward, to heal yourself, to get support. So it really is about nourishing all the other parts of your life in the meantime, because that makes you stronger and more capable to withstand what is going on from the legal perspective. And to remind yourself absolutely what you said. The other side wants it to drag on for longer. They don't want it to finish soon. They're getting pleasure out of it. They're getting energized by it. You're getting depleted, they're getting energized. Your resources are depleting, they might get a better outcome at the end of it. So it goes to that idea of how do we heal the body and the mind after. And that's where all the things such as starting therapy, starting some trauma-informed therapy in particular, some bodily-based interventions as well, such as yoga that is trauma-informed can be very specific. Even things like self-defense classes can be amazing. I've had some of my clients do that, and they have found the strength and safety in their body that they didn't have. So that can be quite beneficial. Becoming more immersed in your own life. What were your ambitions? What were your goals before all of this started? Was there some kind of training or studying you want to take up again? Is there a career change that you were looking after? Those are also important things to be doing in the meantime.
If you can choose one thing from that, try and do one of those things. And I've heard it saying to look for the glimmers in your day. So you don't have to have an amazing day, but you also don't have to have a bad day. One thing might happen in the day that's bad, but there could be a lot of things that are good that happen in, like you get to sit in the sun and have a cup of tea, or speak to a friend on the phone, or someone smiles you at the shops. If you're just acknowledging it and seeing that there's still good in the world, I think that is going to help. And I know that sounds so wishy-washy to someone who's going through absolute hell, but it can help keep you a bit stronger so that your ex can't break you down to give in.
Yeah.
And I think Krasi, I'm sorry, we haven't got more time to talk to you, but we will talk to you again another time for sure. Just a reminder to everyone that Krasi has her workshops available. That's at kirovapsychology.com.au/workshop. You'll see it up on the screen.
And only in person in Melbourne, I have to say. I don't yet have an online telehealth version.
Yet. No.
Yeah.
But also our online course, the DIY Divorce Blueprint, is open until Thursday if you're listening to this when it comes out. This is coming out on the 11th of June, so you've got one more day. And like Krasi was talking, we also have a community. Mum and I meet with them once a week. If you want to come along online, you can come from anywhere in Australia. And it's a really supportive atmosphere for people to, even if you don't have a question to ask or you don't want to talk, you can see that, okay, there's other people going through this. And I do see people bonding over, oh, my ex did this. Oh, my ex did this too. And it just makes you feel less alone. So if you do want to join the DIY Divorce Blueprint, it is available until Thursday. We close doors for members so that we can take care of everybody. And also, Krasi, how often are your workshops?
I'm trying to run them every couple of months now. So the next one is July, kind of mid-July.
Okay.
Lovely.
So go and have a look on our website, remembering that we close doors for our online course and community group on the 12th. But again, thank you so much, Krasi, for coming along again. You're so calm. Even just the way you speak, it's relaxing.
It is.
I could listen to you speak all the time. I hope whoever's listening to this at night can just feel so much more less stressed because they've heard all of the amazing things that Krasi has said, and just the energy is just so chill. And again, thank you, Mum, for coming along as well, because you just make everyone feel safe. So thank you,
Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krasi.
Thank you, guys. And I'll see you all again next time. And Krasi, we'll see you on the pod soon.
We'll see you.
Bye, Krasi.
Bye.
Bye, Laura. Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.